Hello neighbor, I'm Robert Burns and welcome once again to another edition of Sound Off Louisiana. And today we're going to be reporting on as much as I was able to attend of the trial of Jacob Brown. He is a former Louisiana State Police trooper who is alleged to have engaged in excessive force and prior to his resignation, as you will see in an Associated Press article, apparently did that on a number of occasions, the vast majority of which were black motorists. And I would have very much liked to have been up in Monroe where the trial took place in federal court in Monroe for the entire trial. It started on Monday. Today is Thursday. It was a 3-day trial. It wrapped up yesterday. However, I had to be in Houston for what is important to me. Priority number one, you're looking at him, and that was for a follow-up visit with my ophthalmologist. And I praised Baylor University's medical center. I'll just briefly say she tweaked both lenses. I already had fantastic vision, but she said no, and I think she's a perfectionist. So I got a new set of contacts on Tuesday, and I'm here to say she improved on what was already a fantastic product. And they're even more comfortable. I don't have adequate vocabulary to express how much I appreciate the fine folks at Baylor University Medical. So for that reason, I was in Houston on Monday and Tuesday and unable to attend the trial. And I want to give a special shout out to Miss Angela at the federal courthouse in Monroe because I was hamstrung like that having to be in Houston. I needed to try to see if this trial was progressing as planned. I had read all of the pleadings up to the motions that had been filed leading up to the trial. The prosecution anticipated the case to take 3 days for them to put on. The defense had estimated that it may take a day to possibly a day and a half. And so Miss Angela was gracious enough. I called her each day and she would give me updates as to where things stood. And so on Wednesday morning, which is yesterday morning, I departed from Monroe after first confirming with her that things were pretty much on schedule. And she was gracious enough to get me a report from when I called early Wednesday morning. And she told me that the prosecution was expected to rest sometime that day, which was yesterday. And then the defense would have its opportunity to present its side. So I took on off from Monroe. I left Baton Rouge at approximately 12:30. It was literally right before 4 o'clock when I arrived in Monroe. So what I decided to do was call Miss Angela again since she was so helpful. And I asked her, okay, would I be better off to go check into a hotel because they pretty much wrapped it up for the day? And because I was anticipating I would get to at least see a little bit of the defense putting on its case, and then possibly that spill over to Thursday before it went to the jury. Miss Angela told me, well, Mr. Burns, she said, the jury began deliberations about an hour and a half ago. And I said, well, that being the case, I guess I better get there. And she said, oh yes, there are plenty of people hanging out, and you're certainly welcome to come join the crowd. So that's what I did. In fact, when I pulled up to the courthouse, I encountered Mr. Mike and Mr. Adam, two of the defense lawyers, and they were hauling out boxes and boxes. And, my biggest fear was, okay, I got all the way up here and they're going to tell me that the jury's reached its verdict. So I said, Mr. Dubose, I said, can you just tell me, and we were across the street from one another, they're carrying all of this to their vehicle, and I'm trying to get out of my vehicle, and I did not wear long pants because, well, I put them on right outside the courthouse because everybody knows it's hot. And I said, Mr. Dubose, I said, has the jury really reached its verdict? He said, no, they're up there deliberating now. And so I got on up there. So let me just say this. Miss Angela had told me that it had been a packed courthouse every day. And I could certainly see that to be the case. There was a contingency of approximately 60 people, if you will, as she called it, hanging out. Let me just say this. These were all Jacob Brown supporters. It was family and friends and whatnot. Colonel Reeves was there. Former Colonel Kevin Reeves was there. And it was very obvious to me that he is still very much revered up in that neck of the woods. I will just leave it at that. We did not exchange pleasantries, myself and former Colonel Reeves, not through either one of us going out of your way to avoid one another, but I didn't see fit to go up and say, "How you doing, Colonel Reeves," nor did he with me. He did, however, carry on quite a number of conversations with an awful lot of folk in the room as we were, quote, hanging out. All right, so the jury had been deliberating for about an hour and a half at the point that I arrived, and I sat just like everyone else. I would estimate it was about 40 minutes. And then we were informed by the judge, or at least by folk representing the judge, that the jury had requested to see the video again. Most of this prosecution was based on a single video involving the one whose civil rights were being alleged to have been violated, specifically Aaron Bowman. And so the judge indicated that he wanted the courtroom cleared for the jury for viewing the video again. And so we were all instructed that we were to go up to the third floor. This courtroom was on the second floor. Mr. Dubose did tell the audience, and like I said, there was 55, 60 people, probably 70 when you include those that were kind of roaming to kill some time, that it would have been his preference for the audience to be able to remain in the courtroom for the playing of the video, because, as he said, he thinks it would show a showing of support for Mr. Brown. However, the judge was clear that he wanted the courtroom cleared. And so we all were sent up to the third floor while the jury watched the video again. That whole process took probably 30 minutes, maybe 40, give or take, at which time we were told the jury has completed the watching of the video another time, and so we were then free to go back into the courtroom. It was at that point that the judge said, "Okay, we have one other issue we're going to have to discuss here." Now the jury's gone. The jury's back retired. And he said, "The jury has sent another note and they have this question. They say, what do we do if we are at an impasse?" And at that point, the judge inquired of both sides, the attorneys, the prosecution and the defense. He said, "I want to find out what y'all want me to do with regard to the alley charge." He said, "Because I'm only going to issue one. So let's discuss the timing of when it would be desired to have that alley charge," which I would take to be as an impetus that, hey, continue to deliberate, and if you can't come to a consensus, so be it. The prosecution said, "Your Honor, I think it's too early to issue that alley charge. The jury's only been in deliberations for 2.5 hours, and so I think it would be too early to issue an alley charge to the jury." The defense, I believe it was Scott Willison, spoke and said, "Your Honor, the defense is perfectly content waiving the alley charge." And I'm just going to provide my own commentary as to why I think that would be the fact. When you think about it, Jacob Brown was never going to be able to, quote, clear his name, okay? It's just a matter of whether you are found guilty or not in this matter. And so a hung jury is, when you think about it, not an undesirable ending from the vantage point of Jacob Brown. And also Mr. Dubois, after all of this development, he told that audience that he didn't see the government retrying this case if it was a hung jury because of the cost involved and so forth. And so when you think about it, think about this for a minute, because what I did is I placed myself in Jacob Brown's shoes. And my thought pattern was, hey, I'll take a hung jury. We'll have this thing as a jump ball. I'm happy. Because I know one thing, with a hung jury, I'm not going away to federal prison anytime soon. And in all likelihood, I'm not going to federal prison ever over this because, as Mr. Dubois said, the government probably would not retry the case. So some of the tension that was in the courtroom, and that's just natural, when you're waiting for a jury to render its verdict, begin to ease up a little bit, because you got to remember these are all Jacob Brown supporters that are in the courtroom. And look, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's how the judicial system works. I had somebody tell me when I said, kind of gave them an overview like I'm doing now, well, that probably impacted the jury. You know, and my reaction is, well, yeah, that's kind of why people attend trials. It was obvious he had tremendous support within that audience. And so the judge said, I want to carefully word this, as we're not going to do the alley charge now, so I want to carefully word and have it both be agreeable both to the prosecution and the defense, my answer to mine being the judge, to their question about what do we do if we are at an impasse. And so the judge read out what he intended to write, and both sides were agreeable to it. And the note basically said, we are going to order everyone dinner or supper, because he from the South, he had at one time called it dinner, another time he called it supper. So if there's anybody from the North viewing it, quite frequently we will refer to the evening meal as supper. And he said, so he wrote on the note, we are going to order everyone supper. Please continue to deliberate to see if you can reach a verdict. And I may not be verbatim, but that's basically what it said. And both sides were agreeable to that. Supper, or dinner, whatever you want to call it, arrived about 40 minutes later. And I'm going to tell you, I was a little jealous seeing those meals taken back there for the jury, because this old boy was starting to get a little bit hungry. But nevertheless, so the jury gets victuals, grub, and at this point, I know I was thinking, okay, they're going to do their best, and it's going to be a hung jury, and that'll be that. And let me just say this, there was no other media outlet there. And, you know, normally a judge at the end of each day's proceedings, he has to give the admonitions to the jury, look, do not discuss the case amongst yourselves. Do not make any effort to go and find media reports of this case. And if family members talk to you about tune them out, tell them I can't talk about it. Well, let me tell you something. He may as well have skipped over, don't try to find media reports, because trust me, that's the whole reason I had to call Miss Angela. This old boy Googled every conceivable mechanism to try to find out about coverage of the trial. And Miss Angela was gracious enough to tell me that there was no local coverage whatsoever that she had found. And trust me, Google would have brought it up if there was, and there wasn't. Plus, Jim Mustian, the AP reporter for whom we're going to link his feature, had even asked if I was going to be going up to the trial, and that kind of, I guess, was a signal, hey, we need somebody to have boots on the ground. And I told him I would, but I couldn't get up there until Wednesday, which was the case, as I've just told you. So they bring in the meal. It's probably a good hour and 15 minutes after that. If you polled virtually everybody in the audience, I think we all thought, I know I did, okay, this is going to be a hung jury. And the next thing you know, the judge's chief assistant comes in and announces over the little PA, we have a verdict. Well, I was kind of shocked. And I think some other people may have been too. And I put myself in Jacob Brown's shoes, and I don't know that I really like this development. You know, I can't speak for him. I'm just putting if I had been in his shoes. And the reason for that is simple, is that, like I just said, with a hung jury not going to federal prison, we know that now, and probably not going ever for this matter, because if the government doesn't retry it, charges will be dismissed. Now, all of a sudden, I'm told we have a verdict. Well, now there is the possibility that I could be going to federal prison, whereas 10 minutes ago, it couldn't happen. Nevertheless, that's the situation, and so everybody reconvened, all the attorneys get their suits on, so forth and so on. A jury is called back, all rise, and in comes the jury. The judge indicates, okay, I understand. He asked of the floor person, who was a female on the second row about the middle, said, has the jury reached a verdict? And she indicated it has, Your Honor. Okay, would you please pass that verdict to the clerk for the reading into the record, and she did so. And so the judge read it into the record, and this won't be verbatim, but pretty close. In the matter of the United States, U.S. versus Jacob Brown, we, the impaneled jury, find the defendant not guilty. Well, upon the utterance of those words, not guilty, I'm sure you would know Jacob Brown gave a huge sigh of relief. Obviously, all of his defense counsel were quite happy. In the audience, there was a tremendous outburst of, when I say tremendous, I mean, it was not like it was, you know, the judge would have to bring his gavel down. There were sighs of relief, hugging. It was a joyous thing for the audience there, because like I said, he had 50, probably even at the point that jury was, the jury verdict was read, there were at least 45 still hanging around Jacob Brown supporters. I might be a tad off, but it's an approximation. And so with that, it came time to individually poll the jury members as to, was this your verdict? And before I do that, I'm sure everybody's going to say, please tell us the composition of the jury in terms of racial, gender, and so forth. And don't hold me to this exactly, because I tried to make a rough count, given that, hey, I only saw the jury for a brief period. It was approximately 3 white males, approximately 4 to 5 white females, and the remainder appeared to be either African American females or perhaps of Asian descent, but I believe they were probably African American. I'm fairly certain. There were no black males on the jury. That's my best job of letting you, for anybody curious about the composition of the jury. Now, when they went to call each individual juror and ask, was this your verdict? The very first name that they called was the name of a white female on the far right in the front row. And her exact words were, the question posed was, is this your verdict, the not guilty? Her exact words were, quote, reluctantly, but yes, unquote. We might, emphasis on the word might, be able to read into that she may have been the lone holdout. We don't know that. We don't know. Obviously, she had to be convinced, the very use of her word reluctantly, but yes. We will never know unless the jurors were to you know, say that after the fact, whether there may have been some others who may have been inclined to convict. But at any rate, she said reluctantly, but yes. The remaining juror members were called out. Most of them said in a very low tone, none were boisterous, yes it is, yes it is, yes it is. And so with that, the judge then stated that any restrictions, well, first of all, the judge was extremely complimentary of the jury. He thanked them for their service. He said he'd tried an awful lot of criminal trials, and he ranked them among the best juries that he had ever presided over. He said, you all paid incredible attention. You asked questions that were, you know, spot on. That's not the exact word the judge used, but my point is he was extremely complimentary of the ladies and gentlemen on that jury. The judge then emphasized that any restrictions that had been placed upon Jacob Brown as a result of these charges, and he even specifically said his passport is to be provided back to him, and any other restrictions that had been imposed upon Mr. Brown as a result of these charges were to be lifted. And at that point, the judge indicated that the jurors could now exit the courthouse, and so they walked from the jury box to the area in between the prosecution and the defense, and for lack of a better word, I'll call her Miss Reluctantly, she looked over at the prosecuting attorneys and she said, quote, y'all did a great job, unquote. Now, she was the only one that chose to make commentary as she departed, so I guess that gives an indication. Well, I've told you all the facts, let me just stop there. So with that, obviously I am going to let you, I'm not going to try to bring all of the background on Jacob Brown and whatnot. You can get that from the link that we're providing for Jim Mustian's article. The only role I was able to play was to let you know that there was some drama during courtroom deliberations. It was not as easy as, okay, the jury went out and came back not guilty. The only way you would know that is if you were there, and fortunately I was. So that's going to wrap it up for this feature. Let me just say this, the Carl Cavalier hearing in Judge Don Johnson's courtroom is coming up on Monday the 7th. There have been some filings here recently with regard to that. And I don't want to go into it on this feature. I'm going to try to get out a feature on Sunday evening leading up to Mr. Cavalier's court hearing. There have been some interesting, there are interesting filings, two of them. And we'll just see how it all plays out. That's going to be on Monday, August the 7th in 19th JDC. So if anybody would be inclined to attend, feel free. I will be there. I already know for a fact there's going to be, just like with Jacob Brown, there will be a significant contingency of Carl Cavalier's supporters. And that's the way the judicial system works. As the judge told the jury, we wouldn't be able to function without the services of folk like y'all. So with that, it's a wrap. This was an all video. So for those of you who like that, I hope you were pleased, and I made it a little more like you were in the courtroom yourself, but only, I'm sorry, but it could only be for the period while the jury was in deliberations. Had I not had my ophthalmology appointment, I would have attended the entire trial, but that's life. So thank you once again. We look forward to bringing you another Sound Off Louisiana feature, hopefully as soon as Sunday, pertaining to a preview of the Carl Cavalier matter that will be held on Monday, August the 7th at 10 a.m. in 19th JDC in Judge Don Johnson's courtroom. Thank you, everyone, for your dedication and your viewership. Once again, we'll see you soon.